Welcome to Inquiry, a podcast geared towards students where we discuss all things related to tech, from school to industry.
My name is Annie.
And I'm Daniel, and together, we are your co-hosts.
Our team at Inquiry has been working hard to put together an 8-episode focus series titled Tech After High School. In each of these 8 episodes, we will be featuring various tech programs in Canadian schools, from varying computer science programs to biotechnology and biomedical engineering. For today's episode, we are super excited to have Keith join us. Keith is a second-year computer engineering student at the University of Waterloo. Once again, thanks so much for joining us, Keith. Why don't you start off by introducing yourself?
So, apart from being a student at the University of Waterloo, I'm actually not from Canada. I moved from the Philippines, and it's sort of been a cool learning adventure being my first year here in Canada, not just culturally, but just sort of meeting new people. And I'm just very glad to be part of this podcast. And as a prior member of PTC, this is a great organization.
Thanks so much, Keith. And it's really a pleasure having you join us back here on this podcast today. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit more about computer engineering. So what exactly is CE?
So the way I like to think about it is computer engineering is sort of delving into the core functionality of computers in general. So if you think about computer science, typically you think of web development and making applications, but computer engineering is very different. It's talking about the low-level processing logic of a computer, right? Like when you think of the ones and zeros, that's exactly what a program is. If you've ever heard of assembly is essentially the core of our entire program.
Awesome. So would you be able to tell us a little bit more about computer engineering at the University of Waterloo?
Yeah, for sure. Computer engineering is offered as co-op, both 4-stream and 8-stream. 4-stream just means you spend the first 4 months studying and then you go right into work. 8-stream means you spend the first 8 months studying and then you go into work. It's a pretty great program, quite competitive. You'll find a lot of people join computer engineering because they think it's related to computer science. And I have to say that's kind of a big mistake. Because in my opinion, I have a lot of friends in computer engineering who went into it thinking it would be a lot like computer science. And, if you're listening in on this podcast thinking that you want to join computer engineering because computer science is too competitive, I'll have to say perhaps it's not the best choice. Computer engineering covers a lot of topics in electrical engineering, right? You get a lot of physics, circuits, you get a lot of low-level circuit analysis, transistors, semiconductors, low-level logic. And these are the things that people in computer science typically don't need to think about. You can definitely specialize in that if you take computer science, but it's typically something that people don't care too much for. We have a lot of physics courses. It's not what people would expect if you go into computer science. So that's sort of something that I feel like people need to keep in mind when they apply, because it's a bit of a misleading name, right? Computer science is only one word away from computer engineering, yet it's so different. If I were to suggest some engineering discipline to apply to that's more like computer science, I would say definitely software engineering. And if software engineering software engineering at the University of Waterloo has a really competitive reputation to it. So if software engineering isn't a thing for you, I wouldn't fall back on computer engineering. I'd actually fall back to systems design engineering, because what they cover is a lot more related to sort of the topics that you deal with in the workforce for computer science.
Awesome, and that's really, really great insight. So could you tell us a little bit more about why you chose computer engineering specifically at Waterloo?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm one of the only people in my program that chose computer engineering because of what it is. I absolutely love working with computers at a low level. When we had a course called ECE 124, which was extremely challenging, and I struggled through it, but it was so fascinating. And we just learned, it's called digital logic or something, and it's basically talking about logic gates, making finite state machines, sort of working with field programmable gate arrays, which are sort of just like programmable logic gates. And these are like low level things that I've always wanted to do since I was in like middle school. Like when I was in middle school, I had this one teacher where I would keep bugging him because he had these cool little boards and I wanted to play around with them, and they were called Arduinos. And I was just like so fascinated by them. And sort of that interest lasted all the way through high school. So it was just a natural choice for me to choose computer engineering over anything else. I did apply to software engineering and computer science. I found that regardless of acceptance, I think computer engineering would be something I would choose anyway.
That's really great to hear that you had that insight at such a young age. So, what kind of student would you recommend this program to then?
I think if you know you're into computers at a low level and you love hardware, if you really like Iron Man, for example, if you really like watch Iron Man, you're like, wow, he just made that suit. I guess that's more mechatronics, but like, if you think about like making a computer from scratch and like working with circuit boards, if that excites you, computer engineering is perfect. If what excites you is like coding in Python, managing data, making a website using React, making a database, things like that, if that excites you, perhaps not. It's a subtle difference, and it's hard to understand unless you've seen it firsthand. So I totally understand why there's confusion.
Yeah, so speaking of this confusion, do you have any tips for students how they can come to know kind of the different components that excites them to clear up this confusion before they head into making their decision?
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with schools in Canada, but trying to get into different clubs is definitely important. If you know as a fact you're into tech, try joining a robotics team, and at the same time try joining computer science oriented team, like competitive programming, for example, and try to see like what sort of you tend towards more. Like I sort of did a similar thing. I had friends that were really into computer science, and I joined a robotics team, and I just found that the robotics team was just so much more satisfying. So it was just like really obvious for me. Just like it's hard to say what you like unless you actually spend time doing it.
For sure, definitely encourage all the listeners to head out and join clubs, try things out while you're still in high school before making that decision. So, we're going to move on and talk some more about campus life at Waterloo. So, I know currently with the pandemic and everything, things have changed drastically. But so far, Keith, how have you found your experience at the University of Waterloo?
So far, I've only really spent 4 months at Waterloo on campus. It was my first winter, so it was really cool. It was a really cool experience. I stayed at St. Paul's, which is a university college. It's a bit far from everyone else, and I didn't really have anyone from computer engineering in my building. I had like one person, but I don't know, it's a very quiet area. I don't know if I can compare it to other universities. I did a summer program at the University of Toronto. It's called Deep, and I feel like it was like an immersion into university life, and it was very hectic. You're in the middle of the city, it's very loud, but at Waterloo, it's very quiet. It's very, and everyone is also very like study based. Like if you go to the library, you'll just find a ton of people just studying. And a lot of your friends you'll find have a very heavy emphasis on studying. So everyone sort of takes themselves very seriously. But at the same time, people know how to have fun. We have O Week for engineering, which is really cool. You'll get to see things like EdCom, which I find hilarious. There are these people who dress up in like military outfits. It's like a rite of passage for engineers to get screamed at by EdCom. It's a very spirited, very passionate life at Waterloo.
Definitely a great environment to study in and get your focus on. So you mentioned staying at a university college. Could you explain a little bit more about how that works?
The system might have changed by the time the listeners are listening to this, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, when you apply to live in residence, you get sent to a portal, and you have like two options. You can live in the university residences, like CMH, UWP, like U Waterloo Place, and like just like those places, like you can apply to those, or you can apply to the university colleges, which is like Conrad Grebel, St. Jerome, St. Paul's. And it's just a matter of preference. The university residences, you definitely get a lot more people close to your program, I believe, because they match you up. But if you go to the university residences, university colleges, sorry, you get a lot more specialized programs. Conrad Grebel has a lot of music, I think. St. Paul's in particular is the environment residence. So almost everyone I lived with was in environment, as in like the faculty of environment. Yeah, I think university colleges are also a lot smaller and a lot more like it gives a little bit more of a home feel. Everyone I know who's lived in the university college sort of comes out with a little friend group of their own. And speaking to people who lived in university residences like UWP, there's so many people stuffed into a tiny place, it's hard to make a friend group. So there's that. And I also had one of the reasons why I chose St. Paul's is also because they had one of the newest rooms in the entire campus. So I had like a really nice room all to myself, which was really sick.
For sure. And would you recommend that students, especially first year incoming students, live on residence as a whole, or even more specifically, the university colleges?
Depends on your preference. I mean, if you're from Waterloo, maybe just save the money. I don't know. If money's priority for you, save the money if you live near Waterloo. If you really don't mind the atmosphere and you want to meet people through clubs anyway, then there's no really point to be in university college. They're really far from campus. Then they're kind of out of the way, and you don't get to participate that much in campus, in like really into campus life. Like we have our own catering, so I never really got to eat at like the university places. I couldn't use my walk card for like cha time and stuff because I didn't have a meal plan. So you don't really get, if you do a university college, you kind of sacrifice the campus life, but you do get your own like university college life. If you're more into the being in the same building as like a ton of people, like group mentality kind of thing, and you want to try like campus food, which in my opinion is a little bit better than the food we had at the university college, then I think go for like the university residences. It's all about like your own personal lifestyle. I know people who probably would have rather stayed at university residences than university college.
And thanks for that insight. So, I'm not sure if you can speak too much on this, but how would you say living on university colleges compared to living off campus altogether?
So I'm currently living off campus, and I think just in general, living in residence is kind of special because you're living in the same vicinity as other people and you make friends with people, and you can just, all your neighbors are your friend. And we just like chill and talk just all night. It's fun. You can do that kind of thing. Living off campus, you really can't because these are apartments. Everyone has their own privacy. You can't just knock on your neighbor's door and be like, hey, I want to just chill. That's not really how apartments work. That's the main difference other than food, in my opinion. I guess commuting also, but I'm currently staying at a place like right in front of the campus. So it's not too far. It's actually closer to campus than the university colleges, which is kind of funny.
Wow. Okay. So, would you have any advice for students who are looking to live off campus in Waterloo?
Yeah, I mean, meeting people is not something that you should undermine. Like, especially, I guess because of COVID, that sort of is kind of skewed because you don't want to meet new people because they could have COVID. But I don't know, like, don't underestimate the power of making connections, right? Not only just for your own mental health and making friends, but also just professionally. Like, I've been able to have the fortune to meet people from so many different programs just because I was in university college and just because like I have roommates that I was not friends with initially, right? Like I have all these connections now that I'm sure will be great in the future. I'll be able to, see people move everywhere and I'll be able to have a friend anywhere I go. And these connections are just sort of important in life. I'd say don't underestimate them.
Absolutely. Great piece of advice. You know what they say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. So, speaking of networking, getting to know people, clubs are also a great way to do so. And you've mentioned briefly being part of different clubs. So, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about what sort of clubs you're currently involved in?
Oh, I haven't really been in that many clubs. The co-op sort of ate that up for me, which I have to admit I'm kind of ashamed about, but it is what it is. I did join a club called Midnight Sun, which is this solar car racing team. And it's a really cool experience being able to dive headfirst into actual like low level programming. They're literally making a car from scratch. You jump in and it's really what you get out of it is what you put into it, is what they keep saying. Like if you want to join and put it on your resume and not do anything, yeah, you can do that. If you want to join and work on it 12 hours a day every day, yeah, you can do that. It's a design team and all the design teams are sort of like that. So if anyone's going into engineering, 100% join a design team. I did join PTC. One of my friends was a part of PTC, and he asked me if I was interested, and it was a really cool program from what he described. So I sort of joined it that way, but that's sort of non-traditional. I didn't just find it and sign up. You know, my plan for like 1B was to get involved in more clubs. This was before COVID hit, but my plan was to, join a lot more clubs, get more involved. And I think that's sort of an advice I would give people, like a cautionary tale. I sort of spent a lot of time in 1A just like not just like studying and only studying, which like sure it does show in your grades and it did show in mine, but I don't know. I would have rather preferred, I don't know, doing stuff like volleyball, for instance. I played a lot of volleyball in high school and I haven't played in so long. I miss it so much. And like rock climbing. I recently picked up rock climbing and it's insanely fun. And if I had done these things in first year, I think my mental well-being would have been much better off.
For sure, it's super important to keep that balance going even as things get busy and in post-secondary. So you briefly touched upon these really cool design teams where you seem to build things from the very beginning. Yeah. So what kind of requirements are required for somebody who's interested in joining these design teams?
Nothing. You just join. That's what's so great about them.
Awesome. Yeah. So is it limited to students kind of in engineering, or is it open to any student across the university?
I think it depends on the design team. Okay, so what I said earlier applies to Midnight Sun, but like I'm pretty sure you could be in any program when they take you in. Like they really don't care as long as you contribute or as long as you have fun. I know some other teams take applications. I don't know which ones, but Midnight Sun, you just join. If you're in, I don't know, political science, you can still join, I'm pretty sure. I mean, you probably wouldn't have course material related to the work, which makes it a bit hard, but like, you can still join. Nothing's stopping anyone.
That sounds like a really awesome learning experience then. I'm glad you guys have that. Yeah. So let's turn the conversation more towards academics then. How would you describe the academics at Waterloo?
It's definitely challenging. It's an engineering program, and engineering in like every university is hard. I feel like no matter where you go. I honestly would compare it to my time in IB in high school. Um, Perhaps my IB was, from what I'm talking to people about, it seems like the IB I went through was a bit more stressful than what other people went through. But I don't know. I would compare it to 12th grade IB managing. I did HL math, chemistry, and physics, and then SL language and literature, Chinese, and economics. So like that sort of workload is just pretty much 1A and 1B. I can't say anything about the online term though, because that was unlike anything I've ever done before.
For sure. Now let's break that down further. We actually receive a lot of questions in terms of the IB program on whether that helps prepare you for university. So what are your takes on that?
If you take HL math, first year will be a breeze. If you take HL physics, first year 1A, 1B will make a lot more sense. That's pretty much it. Like everything just makes so much more sense. I don't understand the Canadian education system, but I did have a friend who didn't learn complex numbers in high school. And I kind of felt bad because it was sort of like a given. Like it was in the lectures, it was just like, ah, yes, this is a complex number, square root of -1. Anyway, moving on. And the guy was just like lost and just kind of felt bad. But like obviously they did still pull through with the course. It's just like IB just sort of gives you context for everything. Like even ECE 106, which is like apparently supposed to be like one of the hardest courses we're going to take according to our professor. Sure, it was hard, but like we sort of covered similar concepts in HL physics. Like you're talking about like magnetic flux. If I say that and and you took HL physics, you know what I'm talking about. Like B equals IL kind of thing, right? So like you you get context. It's not gonna give you the same content you took in IB, but like you'll be like, the professor will say like, okay, calculate the flux through this region of area and how that changes with time. If you did take HL physics, you'll just be like, okay, yeah, this is confusing, but I know what's going on.
Aside from just giving you that really, really great context and that advantage over your peers, would you say the IB program gave you any other benefits in terms of transfer credits or meeting distribution requirements, whatnot?
The thing about engineering is I don't think you can do transfer credits because you need the hours for the engineering accreditation. So I couldn't transfer any of my credits. I'm pretty sure I could have probably skipped a lot of first year courses, but like I think if you're in non-engineering, you can definitely skip it. But no, sadly, there are no benefits.
Yeah, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Awesome. And thanks for that insight. Now, first year, how was that experience transitioning from high school into university? It's a lot of stress for a lot of people. How did you find your experience in particular?
Like I said, I feel like my my IB was a lot more stressful than other people because it just felt like IB for me. IB, but at university. Like I balanced a lot of extracurriculars in high school mixed with my course load, and it just felt like that, just the same. But living on campus. That's the way I would have described it. It's pretty much it. It wasn't that much of a shock to me how much work I had to do because I was so used to working that much anyway.
That's really good to hear. So then, would you be able to elaborate some more on what kind of courses you did in first year?
So for first year, 1A, oh, when I say 1A, I mean like the first semester of first year, we had math 117, which is calculus. It was very straightforward, pretty much like high school calculus, with a little bit more. We had math 115, which is linear algebra. For me, it was very familiar to a HL math option called sets, relations, and groups. It's all about like sort of working with vectors, complex numbers, things like that. Then we have EC 105, which is our physics course. It was just like a broad first year physics course, which was really fun. And we had English 192, just like learning how to write reports. Oh, and then we had EC 150, which is like our coding course. We just did C++ algorithms. If you've ever like written code in C++ or like you know anything about coding, it's a pretty straightforward course. Yeah, that was 1A. For 1B, we had Math 119, which is just Math 117, but harder. ECE 106, which is our physics course, more about electricity and magnetism. So we talked all about Gauss law and like Maxwell's equations. So we covered all of Maxwell's equations. ECE 124, just like our digital logic course, talking about logic gates and stuff. EC 108, which is like I would describe as like a mix of like stats and like just logic in general, making proofs, claims, but also working with set theory. EC 140, which is like a circuits course. So we learn all about like Kirchhoff's current law, Kirchhoff's voltage law, AC and DC analysis, capacitors, inductors, op amps, and ECE 192, which is the economics course where we learn about, because we just learned about like money, interest rates, compounding interest, future value, present value of money, like annuities. Like if you ever want to know about mortgages and mortgage rates, annuity is exactly that. Yeah, it was just sort of odd looking back at it. We just learned about economics. I think that's it. That was all the first year courses. It's quite a lot, but if you come from IB, a lot of what I just said may sound familiar.
All right. So, do you have any general advice for students who are hoping to get into this program or more specifically prepare for this program?
Make sure you know what you want to do. Come naturally. If you really enjoy writing and making stuff for computers, don't force yourself into doing something you don't like. Because I feel like a mistake people make is like, yes, computer engineering, you make a lot of money. So I will force myself to take math and physics and I will join all the clubs. And then, sometimes you end up with bad grades and then you just feel sad about yourself. And it's just like, well, you're forcing yourself into something you're not naturally into. My most broad advice would be just be true to yourself. If your parents are forcing you into taking computer engineering, just kind of remind them that, there's a lot more to life than just academics and all this stuff, right? Like if it turns out you're into something like law or something else, like absolutely just take that. Don't force yourself to take computer engineering because it's gonna reflect in many ways. Like you'll go into first year and you'll take courses that you don't like, and if you don't like computer engineering, it's just gonna suck. But if you love computer engineering like I do, it sucks, but you're gonna go through it because you love the program. I'll do anything to just stay in. That's my biggest advice.
For sure. And that's really wonderful advice. So, thank you for that. Now, you spoke of co op, and speaking of which, we're going to shift the conversation now to job prospects, what a lot of people wait for. So, Keith, I know you've been on co op terms before, and you're currently on a co op term. In general, how have you found the experience with finding co-ops through the university?
Very, very good learning experience. I feel like every program should be co-op, honestly, because no one can teach you. Like nothing I can say in this podcast could possibly teach you what I've learned. The application process is so special. Applying to jobs, you just have to do it. You could prepare your resume, you can practice for interviews, but at the end of the day, you won't know what it's like to actually sit in front of someone who's going to possibly hire you. It's such a valuable life experience. It's pretty crazy. The whole process of looking for jobs, getting rejected is a very important part of it. Getting rejected from jobs you really want, it's heartbreaking, but it happens to literally everyone. Making your resume, getting your resume roasted, seeing people get jobs that you want, like it's all part of it. These are life skills, right? And these are life skills that you can't get from reading a book. I personally think every program should be co-op. Like any program that waits till you graduate to get a job, I feel like that's way too late. I feel like a very changed person after all of it.
For sure. And would you say that the University of Waterloo provided you with resources and help throughout this process?
Absolutely, yes. We get a job portal called Waterloo Works, and it's honestly amazing. It's so streamlined. I mean, there are things that people wish were better, but it's streamlined. You get a lot of companies on there. You get interviews scheduled through it. It's despite its many shortcomings, it's great. You have academic advisors and career advisors you can always talk to. Although I do find their office hours are weird because they directly conflict with all of the class hours. So if you want to talk to them, you have to skip class, which I'm not a fan of because I don't like skipping class. Yeah, you do get a lot of support. And especially during online term, everything's so easy to get support. You just hop on a call with your work term advisor or career advisor or whatever.
Awesome. So, what's the typical timeline for applying to co op in your program?
When the term starts, you get like a couple weeks and then main round starts. Main round is like you get like a couple weeks to just apply to jobs and then they close at the end of that period. And then interviews start rolling out. And then once the main round is done, I think that's after the first month-ish, you get continuous round, which is every week, jobs open on Monday. So you can apply to jobs all from Monday to like Thursday. And then interviews happen Thursday and Friday. And then rankings happen on Friday. And that happens every week continuously until like a couple weeks into work term, I think. So that's pretty much the structure. The good thing about Waterloo is they have a really good website and everything's just out there. It's really easy to find everything.
Wonderful. So, in terms of co-op, then, are you limited to just applying directly through the school's portal, or are you also able to apply externally on your own?
You can definitely apply externally. You just have to do something called an AOJ, which is an arrange own job, and you just have to make sure it fulfills some requirements. One of them, you have to be paid. The other thing, your boss can't be someone you're related to. I mean, they're just straightforward rules. It's just basically make sure your job is actually a job. That's pretty much the restriction. That's really it.
Awesome. All right, let's move into your co-op experiences. And would you be able to share a little bit more about the experiences you've had so far?
Oh yeah, sure. My first co-op was with this company called Ecobee. I worked as an embedded developer. They make smart thermostats, like direct competitor with Nest, if you've heard of Google Nest. It's a pretty great co-op experience. I mainly worked with C++ because that's sort of my main language. I had a really great 4 months. I'm so fortunate to have that job, and they enjoyed my work so much that they sort of took me in part-time for a couple months past my work term. So I did part-time school, part-time work with them. But then once midterms hit, I sort of realized it was a lot, balancing work and a full-time engineering schedule. So I dropped that. But I still have a good relationship with my boss and the HR there. My current work term is with this company called Safe Software. I'm working as a C++ developer, and I'm learning so much. It's kind of crazy. They work a lot with like native C++. So if you're familiar with like the fact that C++ is constantly updating their compiler, they work up to like I believe the C++ 17 standard, and it's just cool learning all about the new features of the standard library and having to actually implement best practices of C++. These people are so smart. They throw words around that I have no idea about, and it's just so fun to learn all this stuff. And it's kind of inspiring thinking like, hey, one day I can be like them.
That's incredible. Do you have any advice for students going into their first co-op term?
I think just don't be afraid to learn. There's always a resistance to learn, but the most important thing is that, if you don't know anything, don't feel bad. They know you're a co-op. They know you just got out of high school. Like, they all know that. Like, if they don't know that, then I don't know what they're doing. But they definitely know your first year, or it's chill. It's such a great experience because it's like working full time, having the responsibility of working full time, but like you don't get the consequences of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. If you don't know what you're doing, ask, and they'll be so forgiving.
For sure. Now, what sort of jobs do grads from the computer engineering program typically go for?
This is why the difference between computer engineering and computer science is so confusing because computer engineering is so broad. I feel like you could be in almost any technology related field. Like you can work as like a low level embedded developer. Embedded developer is like working with robotics and like circuit. A lot of people end up as like web developers, which is very computer sciencey. You could also possibly go down fields of like biomedical. You could go down fields of like very robotics heavy. You go in a lot of fields. I don't know the statistics of what sectors people sort of go to, but that's sort of the distribution of what it's like. Although I'd say the majority end up as like web developers and that kind of thing, just because of the coding experience.
Do you know where you want to be headed after graduation?
I don't know. That's the cool thing about co-op is every 4 months your future sort of changes. Like a year ago, if I were to have a conversation a year ago about where I am at now, that'd be a fun conversation. The great thing about co-op, every 4 months, your outlook just changes completely. Like who knows, maybe 4 months from now, I'll be like, hey, I want to do this instead. It's very volatile, and that's sort of why I like it. Through this trial and error process, you get to find out what you really want to do in life.
For sure, and that's so valuable. Do you have any general advice for students going into co-op in their university program?
Like even if you think you might not be interested in it, just apply. You'll be surprised.
Awesome. And one last question in terms of jobs then. Given that everything has shifted online recently, are you currently completing your co-op online?
Yeah, I'm working from home. Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle, but You get through it. That's why it's even more important to ask for help. What I was saying, don't be afraid to learn. Like, I am learning so much just because I ask questions all the time. Sometimes I feel like I'm annoying my mentor, but I talked to him about it, and he isn't annoyed.
And what would you say the biggest differences are in terms of between in-person working and working remotely?
Atmosphere for sure. When you go to work, you get surrounded by like full adults, right? You're in a workplace. It's very professional. It's very serious. And when you're working from home, it's very easy to forget that you're working for a professional company. That's something that I sort of fear for people moving into their first work term and it being online. It's just it's a bit hard to take it very seriously. You don't get the atmosphere. But I guess people who study well on their own might be more familiar with it.
Do you have any tips on how to kind of get over that struggle?
Not really. There's a lot of tips online. Like if you look on LinkedIn, like people post about it like every day. I see like a new like top 10 tips for staying productive every day. Like, everything works different for everyone. Like for me, I just work. I like my work, so it's fun. Everyone has their own thing.
For sure. All right, and that concludes all of our prepared questions. In general, do you have any pieces of advice for students who are looking into going into computer engineering?
Just make sure you don't fall into the trap of thinking it's like computer science. That's what a lot of people do. If you are listening to this, then that's my biggest thing. If you're choosing computer engineering, make sure you know what it is. If you're looking for something that's more CS related, not saying it is, but like, try looking at systems design engineering. That's something I completely overlooked. And that's something a lot of people overlook. It's a fun program. Definitely look into that. Computer engineering is amazing. I think it's amazing, but just want to make sure you go into it for the right reason.
For sure. So that's it for today then. Thank you so much, Keith, once again for taking the time out of your busy day to come out and chat with me.
Thank you very much.
We wish you all the best as you continue your co-op term, head back to school, and eventually life after graduation. This episode is part of Inquiry's focus series, Tech After High School. We hope you enjoyed.
Thanks for tuning in and having us be a part of your journey to code your future.
Make sure to follow us on social media to stay in the loop and for a chance to have your questions answered in our next episode. See you then.